The Whirlwind game. Yeah,
That's
we can talk
fantastic.
about that. Like, if Fields wants to show that, we can talk about it a little bit more.
Yeah, do you want me to
If
put it up?
Yeah, if you have not seen the Whirlwind game as a Protoss player, you should. We'll show a little bit of it now, but it goes into late game PvT, which has been going much more heavily. And Tasia showed this weekend. This Ghost Viking style that is it's just so crushing in the late game. But setting up these pylons and the cannons allows, even if your observers get sniped, you can still see the ghosts if they cloak. And
Yeah.
it gives you a nice way to reinforce, gives you a nice little staging point. And when it gets into these split map scenarios, it can really help you out in the long run.
Yeah, and if you notice too, like, his Templars are like always spread out, and he's got so many of them that you're never gonna land like an EMP on all the High Templars at once. Where like some players make a mistake, and all their High Templars are kind of with their army, and so you might catch them all. But he always spreads them out. Like, it's obvious he doesn't hotkey a lot of them. Like, if you see even on the video, it shows his High Templar count is 10, and that's after he got 3 sniped already at the Watchtower. So that means he had 13 High Templars behind cannons, spread out, and his composition here, like Colossus Tempest, you're not going to get in range to tear that up underneath the Tempest or get in close to the Colossi because he's got that Templar spread. His map presence is just insane.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, one of the things I wanted to talk about is how did he get to this composition? Like, that's just such, like, an ideal and high-cost composition to be able to pull off.
He did it as a reaction to Alive. Like, Alive wasn't attacking, and he was building planetaries, and he was getting really high ghost numbers. So, Terran does this, you can't attack them, because you're just going to lose. So, he goes Tempest, and he just keeps knocking on Alive's door. So he's sending Zealots at the third. I mean, it doesn't work, 12 times it doesn't work, but that 13th time it works, and he wins the game. So he just keeps going. And the big thing First does is he has to keep the ghost count down. Like, the big part of the cannons and having the Templar spread out is he's constantly looking to see if he can get, 2 feedbacks or 3 feedbacks. Because as soon as the ghost count gets really high, I think this game looks very different. Because you 100% need High Templar for this. Because if he does no High Templar, or if he doesn't have enough Storm, the Terran army's better. Like, the Tempests don't do anything. They just kill the Colossus instantly. The ground army would kill everything.
Well, there's only 4 Stalkers. Like, he only has... I'm looking at his army composition right now. He has 4 Stalkers, an Archon, and a Sentry with his army.
Yeah,
and
his storms are to keep stuff from getting underneath. Yeah.
And then it's Colossi Tempest. Another thing that I'm seeing in this game is that he did the Stalker blink around planetary fortresses, and I don't think Protoss do this enough, where you send these 4 Stalkers around a planet behind a planetary fortress where they can't actually get hit, and they just harass the mineral line. Just blink Stalkers. And I feel like Protoss don't do that enough, because they see a planetary fortress and like, well, I need my entire army to kill that because it was repair. But if you actually can get those Stalkers behind them, because they're likely not going to put a bunker up, because why would they? They got a PF right there.
Yep.
So get the Stalkers behind the mineral line where they are out of range, and just go to town on the SEVs. And then if he brings too much of his army across to go deal with those 4 Stalkers, because I mean they're 3/3 Stalkers, the SEVs aren't going to deal with them. Just send your army and go kill them.
I mean, I like it, but I have a couple of problems with it. I think it needs to be late game. I think it needs to be like a 5th base, and it should be 1 Stalker or 2 Stalkers. Like, you don't want to put that many Stalkers because you don't want that many Stalkers. Like, as a Protoss player, you don't want Stalkers. You want just as much as you need, right? And if you're using Stalkers for harass, well, that's Stalkers that you don't need, right? So, I would think 1 or 2. Make him bring something there, and if it's a 5th base and it's out of the way, you could take advantage of that, right? If it's like a 4th base and it's on a map where it's in a corner and it's easy to defend, I think you're better off just sending Zealots in until something happens, because Zealots are just the better option.
Another thing, too, about First, and when he does that, like, he's always positioned with his army, and I think that's how every player should do it when they harass a base that's far away like that, because the 5th is so far away. He keeps his army close to the closest base to attack with his full army if the Terran player overreacts and sends too much to deal with the small Stalker force. So he's always got that harass going on. On the opposite side of the map is where he's positioning his army to move in if the other player overreacts.
Well, in addition to that, he has his army positioned perfectly to defend his bases as well. So it's not
Yeah.
only offensive positioning, but defensive positioning as well. But yeah, so anything else
Yeah.
you want to touch on?
I don't know. I think first is really calculated play. I mean, he didn't get touched at all the Whirlwind game. Nothing happened. So he got to do exactly what he wanted. And he wanted to go Blink Colossus, one Forge into a third base, into Quick Storm, and then he wanted to go into his War Prism play, right? As soon as he has Storm, that's when he goes. But Alive was playing very turtle. He had turrets everywhere. War Prism didn't do anything. And it turned into this weird Tempest game. But you see in the next game, where you go to Akalon Waste, where he does the same thing. He's not touched, but he makes a couple mistakes here and there.
Yeah.
That cost him the game.
Mhm.
But I guess we could talk about that too.
Well, game 4, there's not. I mean, yeah, it's just like you said. Like game 4 was basically just he made some mistakes, and Alive kind of played more aggressive early on and caught him up in it, and so it was a pretty quick game, and he just kind of ended up dying before he probably should have in normal games. But like game 5 on Derelict is worth talking about a lot too.
I like
And there's
that game.
another clip you can definitely play. Yeah,
Yeah, I'll
that
play
game
that
is beautiful. It's like textbook beautiful.
Well, it's the same thing, right? He falls behind and he knows he's in trouble, and he completely skips Colossus and goes right to Storm. I think that's his reaction to any time
Like-
he's in trouble.
He just plays so amazingly positionally.
Yeah.
It's so hard to play against somebody that does that.
Like this
Like
fight.
he's got his Templars spread out here so well that like even if you snipe a couple of his Templars, he's got more that are flanking. Like these storms that he lands, they're insane. Like that's like kind of storms that you can't even dream of getting. But because of his positioning, he almost always gets storms like that. At least a couple.
And at the same time, he's like across the map, forcing APM
Yeah.
and like actions. It's like
Yeah,
I don't know how he
kills-
does it, to be honest.
He kills like 40 workers while defending at his
Yeah,
third. Like
yeah. I don't. It's like an attack that's coming that looks like it can't be defended, and then
Yeah.
defends it and does damage to his opponent.
Well, and I feel like the damage though is a part of him holding it because the Terran is not able to reinforce his attacking army.
Yeah, the reinforcements are having to stay at home to deal with it, and since they're popping out of the production right there in his base, he's not trading cost efficiently versus that War Prism.
Especially with like ghosts and stuff popping out, because that's what the Terran wants to remax on immediately.
Yeah.
It's just so good. I mean, if his army is across the map and you're winning a fight, and then there's a War Prism in your base, that's the game over. So, but I don't know how First knows these things. Like, if I'm behind and I see this huge, scary ghost army coming, and I don't have my army small compared to it, and I have to throw up cannons, I'm not going to think, well, I better War Prism his main. You know, I'm going to think, shit, I need as many units at home as possible. Like,
Exactly.
he had enough for both. Like,
Yeah.
it's nuts.
Well, he didn't go Colossus game, right? Because he got behind early on.
He
Right.
adds them like after
Yes.
he'd already won.
So-
like that,
Yeah.
like what we saw the first part of the clip was like that was it. That was the death animation, and then he's like, "Well, I guess I'll just make Colossus now to be 100% certain I can win the game on my
Yeah.
next push."
Yeah, at this point he's up 70 supplies. So
Yeah, the game's over now.
He goes on Templar. How many gates was he on this game? Do we know? Probably about 10, 11.
I think
By
he
the time
normally
of
has
that
10 or
attack.
11 on 3 base, so I'd say yeah, probably.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was using about like I think during that attack he'd warp in like half of his gateways worth at home and the other half with the warp prism.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's
think
just
it was
very
about 4
calculated.
Yeah.
okay.
Well, we could probably talk about that series for even longer.
a long
but
time.
An effort to keep it moving, we probably better move on. But if you're a Protoss player and you like PvT, or even if you don't like PvT, you should watch that series. It's from a Protoss perspective, it's beautiful. And not to take anything away from Alive, he played great. Like he played such good standard Terran and safe standard Terran for the most part. Like he put the bunker at the third base because First does those run bys. He did wall offs and stuff. He played really good. It's just First played near perfect PvT in the games he won at least.
Yeah. I can agree with that.
So, do you guys want to talk about the Tasia and Brain series at all?
Yeah.
You probably should.
We should. I don't want to. but
I
we
feel
should.
bad.
I mean, Tasia played fantastic StarCraft the entire weekend.
Mhm.
Yeah,
He's
he was
just
probably the
fired.
second best player at the tournament. I think Bomber's the only person who looked better than him over the
Yeah.
weekend.
Mhm.
And Bomber only
I
looked
think
better
that's
than him
pretty
barely. Because Tasia did come back in that series between them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like even watching Rain lose, it almost like was like from like such a disadvantage. Even watching him going into the those games, it just felt like he still had a chance the way he plays it out. Even though he was playing so slowly, it was just so methodical. Like I don't know, I'm really a big Rain fan. I like how he plays out DVT.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's probably one of the reasons why Teja did so well. Like, Rain's a great PvT player on his own, but he plays so safe and standard that it's. I mean, like every time we see Rain try and do an all-in, it's like obvious that Rain doesn't all-in very often because he like doesn't quite execute it right, or he hits at this wonky timing that you're like, I don't know if this is gonna work. And Teja just he looked like a macro beast. Like he took advantage of it. He was always Tasia did not let Rain get map presence. He didn't let Rain set up, vision everywhere and perfect positioning. He sniped like 29 observers in that one game. He didn't let Rain
That was
have a
insane.
clue what was going on and kept him on the back foot. And for a player who's so defensive, like Rain just couldn't get control of the game at any
Oh, I
point.
think it comes down to one thing, and it's the difference between First and Rain, and their builds are actually pretty similar. Like what they want to do, right? They want to go Colossus into Blink, and then eventually get Storm with the third base. That's what First does too. But First does one thing: he moves out and he's attacking. He's not
Yeah.
committing to engagements, but he's attacking. Rain is just saying, "Well, I'm going to defend, and I'm going to wait till I have the advantage." Right? First makes the advantage happen, but I mean, if you let Tasia, push on you instead of pushing on him,
Mhm.
Yep.
it's going to be really hard to win because he just is so good. His micro is so good.
And it's really hard because every Terran player knows that about Rain. Everybody knows what Rain does, which
Yeah,
is
no surprises.
Mhm.
Rain
I
has
mean,
been.
if you play right, you shouldn't lose certain things. Like what gives Protoss and Protoss players like Rain the advantage is when Terran makes a mistake, right? It's when
Yeah.
they lose a medevac or they drop, but there was defense there, or they try to push into their army at the third, but then they get force fielded or something like that happens.
Yeah.
He's just not going to make that mistake. And even if he does, he can load his medevac so quick, it doesn't matter. But
Mhm.
I think that's what it is.
So do you want to talk a little bit about Jaedong and Naniwa? I mean, if you
Yeah.
look at the quarterfinals, obviously there's only two foreigners that made it in, Scarlet and Naniwa. And,
Well-
I mean, that's pretty impressive, if you ask me.
Yeah,
Well, both their runs in this tournament, like they proved that they're both easily probably the best two foreigners, and
yeah.
they both played great. Like the fact that they were having these close series, like Scarlet had the best looking series against the eventual champion Bomber the whole tournament. Like Taja's was pretty close too, but I mean Scarlet pushed the envelope there, and Naniwa played so good, but Jaedong like didn't play the way Naniwa expected him to. Like Jaedong's PV or ZVP this tournament was not Jaedong's ZVP of the Dream Hacks where Naniwa beat him. It was a completely new beast. And like
I don't know,
the
if you're
Naniwa series-
Jaedong,
Yeah.
and then you have people telling you for like 3 or 4 months, like, oh, you suck, your PvP's terrible. He's probably like, I'm gonna fucking kill these people, and I'm gonna become the best fucking ZVP player ever. And he really did look good. Like his games versus Rain, it didn't look fair. It looked imbalanced. But I mean, I don't think it is. But it
Well,
sure looks like that way because Rain played
Jaedong-
perfectly. He
yeah.
didn't lose anything. It was just Jaedong's timing. He had 2 timings. One was with Mutalisk.
his
One
tech
was with
switches.
Vipers.
Yeah, his tech switches
Tech
were
switches, like
good throughout too.
he knows. He's like, oh, I sniped a Colossus during this one battle. If I make Mutalisk, I win. Oh, I sniped a Colossus, but it's on Whirlwind, and you're going Void Rays. Well, you're not gonna have Templar in time for Vipers. And that switch goes off in his head, and he knows how to win. Right?
It
More
was-
players need to be like that, where they know how to win a game from just when a certain thing happens.
It was
One of the thing-
beautiful ZP.
One thing I noticed from that series is like the first 2 games I think it was like Naniwa tried something new. Like he didn't use the same style that we saw him use in WCS Europe and like beforehand. Like he's been doing a lot of Void Ray stuff in WCS Europe and it seemed to be working well for him. It was his new sort of go-to. But like in the first 2 games he tried some timings and they just really didn't work. Like he did that Immortal Zealot attack on Neoplanet S and it did okay, but it didn't quite work out. And so, like, Naniwa knew that Jaedong was on 2 bases, and this part like was really cool because as a Protoss player, I was thinking the same thing Naniwa was during the series, like watching a game. Like, if you see a 2-base Zerg and he just held your attack that well, and it was an Immortal Zealot attack,